What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Victory Life Legacy Spotlight. Today, I have a very good guest in the building, one of the best to ever do it from Kecoughtan High School, a standout also at JMU, a guy I grew up playing against, a great father, a good friend to many, a great teammate, a leader, a great coach. I got my guy, Tony Jordan, in the building, man. How you doing, Tony?
Hey, man, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for those kind words, man. I do appreciate that.
Yeah, man. No, it's all true, man. We've talked on offline about leading up to this interview about the greats from the 757, that talent-rich area. So many guys that had an impact for a variety of high schools on the South Side and the Peninsula. I've always said, from like 87, 86 to the early 2000s, that was the golden era as far as the players and coaches you saw, especially in the Peninsula District. We're going to talk about the great coaches you played for in basketball and football, but I want to talk about you growing up, your family, the impact, because we know about what you did on the field at the collegiate and high school level, but let's talk about where you're from, because I think a lot of people don't realize you started off on my side of Hampton.
Yeah, man. And, it's funny, people always talk about Shell Road, Shell Road. I actually lived on Shell Road for my first 5 years. So 2507 house still stands there. It still stands there, right there, right there. It was a pin train stop, as a matter of fact. So
Pin train.
we moved from there because that would have put me at Hampton High School had we stayed. We moved from there over to the Willow Oaks area, Fox Hill area, when I was 5, and that's where we continued to grow up. So definite change in venue, but it would have been very interesting to see how that would have evolved had I continued on and gone to Hampton with their rich history of players and coaches.
And speaking of coaches, one of my coaches, Coach Mann, you guys have a relationship, and did he not try to sway you to join the red and white?
I'll protect the innocent. And let's say it was discussed between my brother, who was 5 years ahead of me, who went to Kecoughtan, and when I was coming through, because Coach Mann lived in the neighborhood adjacent to mine.
Yeah, I knew that. Yeah.
And my mother grew up in somewhat, was very close to her mother at the time. So my mom has known Coach Mann before, back from day one they started dating. So there's a long history where Albus Mann is my godfather and his wife Carol Mann is my godmother. So we go back quite a ways.
Yeah, man. Can you imagine you playing, with Sean Hamlet and Myron Newsome and all the other guys there, Lloyd Tucker, Tyrone Tynes. You had a great impact at Kecoughtan, but it would have been really cool to see you over there with us. But
yeah. And with all that talent you guys had over there, I'm not sure I'd have got on the field. Tell you the truth, all those guys you had over there, I may have been covering kickoffs my entire career.
Well, let's talk about your career, man. Let's talk about when did it start for you? Different guys I've interviewed, women I've interviewed, they talk about, everybody has a different legacy, a different path. It started off with some they had no interest and it just happened. Some they always knew they wanted to play this particular sport. You were a multi-sport standout. When did it start for you in regards to just, I want to play sports? And was it your uncle? Was it your dad?
It was, my dad was a great athlete, but he didn't, back at the time when he was coming through, I was, born on my dad's 42nd birthday. So, things were much different in opportunities for Black men at the time. So he really didn't do a lot of organized sports. Now, what's interesting is my mother, who grew up in the deep South, South Carolina, she, believe it or not, was always athletic, and she was very fast. I can tell you this anecdote, maybe kind of funny, was in South Carolina. I was 10, my brother was 15, and my brother at 15 had a mustache. He looked grown. He was bragging about how fast he was. And my mom was like, yeah, boy, you ain't really that fast. My mom, now mind you, my brother ran track and played corner at UNC. She kicked off her sandals and beat him barefoot in 35-yard race. And I to this day, I still look at him and go, man, mom beat you running. That's all I know. But I think a little bit of, having parents that, played sports, has some athletic ability, having an older brother that played and just kind of tagging along to his practices, it just kind of became the norm of what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And being from that area, which is a talent-rich area, and sports are a big part of the culture, it just becomes immersed in terms of what you do and as you kind of go through. And so, believe it or not, I don't think many people know about this or care, but I stopped playing football in 4th grade. I didn't play again until I got to high school. I was a baseball guy. I was a pitcher and second baseman. So
Mm.
that was my primary sport, probably all the way up through middle school, was baseball.
Wow.
And I just kind of fell out of love with that and became basketball and a football guy.
You know, the more I do these legacy spotlights, the more I find out information I never knew. I didn't even know you did baseball.
Yep.
You know, and you find out a lot of guys back in the day played baseball, but then they went into football or basketball, respectfully. So when you gave up playing football for that short period of time and played baseball, what brought you back to the gridiron? What brought you back to the court?
You know, my mother. I go back to her. A lot of the positive things in my life I can attribute back to either her or my dad or both of them combined. But my brother had just graduated from Kecoughtan and went on to play at UNC. And it was probably August. I was going into my freshman year of high school. And my mother had asked me, was I playing football? And I told her flat out, no, I ain't playing football. I ain't played football in 5 years. So I'm going to go play for it now. And the day before two-a-days, she asked me again, was I going to play football? And I said, no. She goes, well, I'm tired of asking you. You're going to play, and you will be there tomorrow. You know, and coming, you know, and in my house, you don't tell mama no. You just say, I just said, yes, ma'am. I showed up the next day, kind of like, okay, what do I do now? I'm here, you know, let's see where this goes. So it's very different dynamic maybe in today with people, how moms feel about football. But, you know, she used to say, I love going to the games on Friday nights, and I'm not going to give that up. So you're going to play, so I have a reason to go to the games on Friday night. So
No question.
that ended that discussion.
You know, that is very true what you mentioned about moms, because I know my wife is like that in the old school aspect of pushing our kids to do stuff outside their comfort zone. And I remember, you know, several years ago watching Allen Iverson's documentaries and 30 for 30s, how his mom pushed him to play basketball because he just wanted to play football. You saw that growing up back then, where parents were very involved, but in the right way, where they were pushing their kids to step out their comfort zone.
To try something, do something. Yeah.
Exactly. So what do you remember about, you know, that time? I mean, when I talk about that time, I'm talking about the Friday night lights, because you've seen the videos I posted on social media,
Yeah.
the time as far as how special it was, you know, what do you recall?
You know, and I'm gonna start backwards before I even got there. Having an older brother that played, and he was a starter at Kecoughtan from his sophomore year all the way up to his senior year, and he's probably was, you know, at that time, one of the only classes to actually beat Hampton High twice in his. You know, they beat him in 10th grade and they beat him in as a senior. So just that atmosphere of electric, you know, that when Darling Stadium used to be packed to the gills with folks. I just had always grown up in that kind of environment, and that was kind of the norm of what happened. So when my time came and my mother's prodding me onto the field, it's just the energy there. And people don't realize where I live now, every high school, which is cool, has their own stadium, and it has a nice feel to it. But I felt like Darling Stadium brought the city out. I can remember going to see, if I played on Saturday afternoon the next day, being at the stadium on Friday night to watch Bethel play Hampton. You know, Ferguson play Phoebus. You know, it was just what you did. It was as much of a hangout place as Black Mac was. Go to Darling Stadium and see who was going to play and hang out and interact. So it just was interwoven in what we did down there at the time.
And for our listeners and viewers, Black Mac, he's referring to, I had to do this with Ahmad Hawkins and Marcus Higgins. Black Mac is the infamous, notorious McDonald's in Hampton that a lot of us Black people went to after the game to hang out, and we nicknamed it Black Mac, and that's where, you know, you saw a lot of us hanging out, because Hampton and Newport News, albeit, you know, great cities, was not a typical New York City or Queens, or, you know,
you had to make your own fun.
You had to manufacture your own fun, which is great, because I think that's why sports were so big. Tony, talk about when you got to Kecoughtan and the teams you had and who you played with, and playing for the great Curt Newsome, because you and I both share a high admiration for Curt Newsome, because he was just a stand-up guy.
Absolutely. So, you know, Curt Newsome wasn't there when my brother played. I think he was maybe towards the tail end. My brother played for Johnny Pauls, who was the Dean of Boys there. But, you know, going into that environment, and Coach Conrad was there, you were a known entity, not because I had done anything, because no one ever seen you play football in 5 years. It was because your brother was that good. Well, let's see what this guy can do.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember the first day, and this is a true story. You can ask Curt Newsome next time you see him. They bring everybody in and they have the conversation about who plays what positions. And O-line over there, running backs over there, wide receivers over there, and I was going to the wide receiver line. I was like, I can go catch some balls, I guess. And Curt Newsome didn't, but we call him Coach Dive because he don't throw the ball for 3 times a game. So I said, I'll go over here. He grabbed me by the back of my jersey, and he says, no, you're going to the quarterback line. And that's when I started playing quarterback. I mean, it wasn't a discussion. It just was, nope, you're going here. And that's where I stayed throughout my tenure.
And you guys ran that option. And when you ran that option, I joked you on Facebook, and I told you when we talked on the phone, it always seemed like you still fell forward 4 or 5 yards. But you also played with some very good players, man. You played with Lawrence Lewis, Patterson, Mike Williams, Cal Key, who was you talking about Hampton High. He transferred from Hampton High to Kecoughtan, and I remember there was a lot of talk when we had those big matchups.
And Corey Jones came with him.
Corey Jones.
Yeah. There were a number of players, that might, and those, 3 years I played varsity, 2 I actually was the quarterback. I think Mike Williams and Cal Key, they both ran for 1,000 yards that year. Then as I moved on, you had Aaron Henderson who played tight end for us, ended up playing at Randolph-Macon, but Macy Brooks ended up going to JMU with myself, and the great Morocco Brown, who I still very close to this day, was our middle linebacker. I don't say we had a depth of talent Hampton High did, but we had some talented guys. And I remember as a junior, I think it was our Penn relay team, anchored by Tony Wheeler and 3 other guys who played football, Mike Williams, and I think Emmett Talaferro was on it. They won the Penn relays at high school. So, there was some talent on that team, not Hampton High level talent, but there was some talent in that team.
But you know what, Tony, even though I'm a proud crab, but don't minimize it, because you just talked about Mike Williams and those guys winning the Penn relays. I mean, you're talking about guys that were considered more so football players that were so fast that won the Penn relays. And we know the Penn relays back then, the 80s and 90s, you just didn't walk in and win that.
No,
and they won the Penn. I remember that. I was a few years behind Mike Williams and those guys, and he was a Hokie like me, and him and Law Lou when I got there, Lawrence Lewis. But I watched those guys, played against them, and they were like you, multi-sport standouts.
Yeah.
And you talk about both guys, him and Cal Key, both rushing for 1,000 yards.
Yeah.
Even though you guys were a run-heavy team, that still shouldn't be minimized.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and I can't be remiss without mentioning, some of the guys up front. I mean, as a quarterback, the late Jason Robinson, it was a best friend of mine. I still miss him to this day. Malik and Michael Bryce, I think they both went to Winston-Salem State and they played there. So, there were just a number of guys. And one thing, I'll put this back on Curt Newsome, who I think the world of him. If you play, even if you didn't play for him, if you wanted to play college football, he would get on the phone. He would write a letter. He would do anything he could to assist players. And I remember your story telling me about Curt Newsome helping you out. He would do whatever he could to get those guys who wanted to play for the next level an opportunity, whether it was D3, NAIA, Division I or II. He was going to work for players.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, because I found out later, I was just a young kid over on Hampton High. I was heavily recruited, but part of that was playing for Hampton High Coach Smith and the relationships he had, and I was talented and I had the size and speed, but it was also because guys like Coach Newsome put together highlight tapes for me. I didn't even know he was doing. He just put together a tape, and he told recruiters when they went and see you and Macy and all those guys you guys had, Coach Newsome said, you ought to check out Lloyd Tucker, Dwight Vick, and name some other guys. And it really was just honorable in him doing that. That's why I have so much respect for him. Even if he didn't do that, just the coach and man he is, the father he is, he's just a really stand-up guy.
Yeah. I don't know how it was at Hampton, and I'm sure it was the same, but even at Kecoughtan, my success, whatever modicum it was or level it was about the people before me. Kermit Buggs, who took me up under his wing, and handed the keys to the car before he graduated, went to Norfolk State. Milan Brown and Ray Washington, Dr. Ray Washington now, who when I was coming up as a point guard, teaching me how to be a point guard, what it takes to be a leader. So it wasn't just about any type of talent I have. That's not going to get me anywhere. it was about having good coaches, surrounding yourself with having great coaches, surrounding yourself with wonderful teammates, and just having those mentors, those player mentors that you could look up to, bounce things off to you, and they were really determined to help me become a better, whether it was a football player or basketball player, that made me successful. And I think that's the formula that if you look at any successful program, enough of that goes on enough times to perpetuate winning.
Yeah. And before we talk about your great basketball career, take me back to the Friday Night Lights and the battles. What do you remember? I love hearing guys in their own perspective talk about a matchup. Whether it was, the Hampton High matchups, which was a great rivalry, but also you had Bethel with Paul London and those guys when Iverson was a freshman and Paul London and all those guys they had playing for the great Coach Kozlowski. And you had Ferguson with Aaron Brooks and them coming up. What do you remember about the Peninsula District and your battles in football? Before we talk about basketball, what do you remember about those nights, Friday and Saturday?
Every team, we're talking about the Peninsula District. Now, I'm not going to discredit Lafayette and those kind of things. They've moved on to wherever they need to be and are competing there. But it was a matchup. It was somebody you were going, this guy's going to play Saturday or somewhere, somebody. Some teams have more than others. But it's just the energy, especially when it was for us versus Phoebus being on the same street. It was always that, bitter rivalry, but it was respectful to a degree, I guess. Hampton High, even though we were never ever going to be favored, we were going to give Hampton everything we could get. And it was going to be a dogfight. There was not really any weekend you kind of went to a game going, okay, we're going to walk through this thing. I remember the year of my senior year, Bethel had gone through the first 4 weeks of the season undefeated and unscored upon.
Yep.
And I remember, I forget who was talking. I think it was probably Jason. And I said, ain't no way in hell they shut me out. Not tonight. And I think we scored on the first drive. And I remember the play very well. It was a read option, and then we were down probably about the 6-yard line. And I said, I ain't giving this. And we scored. Now, we ended up losing the game, but damn sure you're going to shut me out. But again, it was the energy, the excitement, the fans. In high school, for us to get 6, 7, 8,000 people to a game, I mean, that was commonplace. The other dynamic was interesting is my mother actually taught for a long time at Warwick and became an administrator at Denby for some time in Minchfield. So she would get back to me with, they're all week. They're telling me they're going to get you. They're going to get you. They're going to get you. And my mom would just kind of like laugh it off. But she would always tell me, Warwick's ready for you this week. And I said, well, I'll be ready for Warwick.
Tony Warwick, man, it's funny you mention him, man, because you're talking about William Yarborough, Antonio Banks, and all those guys they had. And when you went over there, you talk about Darling, they had that same massive field at Todd Stadium. And,
Mario Haskett.
Haskett. I mean, that's what I'm saying. That's why I do these, because they need to be mentioned. They need to be talked about. And those battles, it was a bit of a nostalgic there, just the fact that, you mentioned the trash talk, because we didn't have Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat. So it was word of mouth, throughout the 7 cities, especially on the peninsula, Hampton and Newport News,
And don't be out, at Black Mac on Friday. See, you got to play, Bethel and next week. And they are, again, there was nothing malicious, just banter and talk and just, boys being boys, teens being teens. But I remember those nights, and it always made those games just extra exciting. And then the great job that Channel 5 did broadcasting, if you were the game of the week and the televised piece of it, it just was a powerful thing.
Yeah, the Channel 5 piece, Bob Hintz and Tim Cole.
Can't forget about Slow Mo Joe now.
They were one of the first, because the South Side, Norfolk and them didn't have that. They were the first ones in the Taiwood area, and really in the state, I believe. I want to say yes, to really broadcast and do the play of the game and the slow motion and the replays. Yeah. And then after you and I moved on, when Ron C. and Mike and all those guys came, they started doing live broadcasts. Yeah. So, I mean, we were part of a trend, even before you and I with the Eric Hunters and all those guys. It was just really, really big, the movement that started with high school sports, and even with track, football, and basketball and baseball. It wasn't just football. Is there a game? And again, you've played a lot of sports, football and basketball, and even some baseball, as you mentioned. Is there a game in football in your years at Kecoughtan, you were like, yo, this is my game. Like you put it on for your kids or your players you coach. Is this a game like, okay, this is what I remember. I had this moment or this tackle or this touchdown run that resonates with you?
It was probably my junior year. We played Hampton High for the Eastern Region final when Hampton beat us 17-10.
Yep.
And for me, that was, I want to say my coming out party. That's not what I'm going to say here. But what happened in that game was they were really, I think defensively with Cal Key and Mike Williams back there who were doing their thing. I don't think they were really prepared to see me. I hadn't really ran that much, didn't really need to. But I think that was the game that I kind of grew up, if you will, in terms of, okay, you got to step it up. Now, I did throw 3 interceptions, and we did lose. And Sean Hamlet did return 1 400-yard touchdown. I got blocked in the back and got called back.
Got called back.
But nevertheless, though, we got to the point where it was 4th and 10, 4th and 9 on their 13-yard line, and we're down 17-10 with a chance. Sean made a hell of a play, and I did everything I could try to squeeze that thing in there. You know, that's a Florida State Division I 4-star safety right there. That guy's pretty daggone good. But that was the game for me, even in the loss, and even after throwing 3 interceptions, Tarek Cassell's picked off a ball. I still don't know how we got that high to get it. And it wasn't about my stats. It wasn't about the win, and it definitely wasn't about the loss. The lesson was just to compete. Don't have a problem putting yourself out there for failure. Don't have a problem putting yourself out there as to what people may say. It was just getting comfortable with competing and putting it all out there and letting the chips fall where they may. And I think that game for me in that loss was a lesson in terms of competing. That has carried me, and I've fallen back on that for years. So that was that one, I guess, memory for me that is that's poignant and important in terms of what fueled my growth.
Yeah, no, and I remember that game. I was a freshman, and I was a backup on varsity, but I was on varsity, and I remember watching that game. And you talking about Tarek Cassell's, and I just remember even being a part of that moment, watching both sides, Hampton and Kecoughtan, go at it. And that was the year. I'm dipping in my mental Rolodex. I want to get this right. I think the Peninsula District sent 6 teams to the playoffs, 5 teams: Phoebus, Ward, Kecoughtan, Hampton. I can't remember, but I know we had a lot. That's how good the Peninsula District was that year. This is before the VHSL reclassified. Now you got guys going 4 and 5 in the playoffs, and everybody gets a trophy.
You talk about that game. The only reason we played you guys, we ended up beating, I think it was Kellum. And they had Brandon Noble, who ended up playing for the Cowboys.
First Colonial,
excuse me. He ended up playing for the Cowboys, and we beat them. We drove down the field, got a pass interference call, got us in field goal range, and we won 7-10. And that was the first playoff game Kecoughtan had ever won.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
That was the first playoff game, because you remember the old district days. If you didn't win the district, you don't get out.
Oh, you going? Yeah, way back. Yeah.
So so we didn't win the district, but we got out, and that was the first playoff game I believe Kecoughtan had ever won. And that's crazy. 1990 season, 1991 school year, that was their first playoff win.
Yeah.
And I think I'm correct on that. I have to fact check me here, like we're CNN, but I'm pretty confident that I'm correct there.
All right. Well, look, Tony, let's talk about the hardwood, because just like we just mentioned with the football battles of Peninsula District and even going across the water to the south side, it was fierce competition. It was just as fierce on the basketball court. Now you're talking about, when you hooping on that basketball court, you played your teams at Kecoughtan was stacked. You keep talking about talent, but y'all had some dogs. And then y'all mysteriously got some guy named Rashawn Ely who looked like he was a grown man. And you had Fazil Abraham. I know you saw my interview with the Abraham family. Yes. Fazil Abraham had a headband he wore on his arm. That's how big his arms were in high school. And
he was a grown man.
Yeah, and Morocco, who, like you, actually Morocco was a 3-sport star. Yes. So he was a youngin' because he was my year. But he was able to play up because he had that high IQ, and we know about his father's legacy and how he was just such a great man. But let's talk about playing for Coach Conrad, and let's talk about those great players you played with in the battles in the PD back then.
Well, before I would say anything, first off, Coach Conrad, I owe a lot to him as not just a coach, but as a mentor and as a person. He just always treated everyone around me, and especially myself, with such respect, and gave so much of himself to the sport, to the school, to the team, that a lot of who we are from the Kecoughtan time, we owe him. And we can't say thank you enough. And I think about him quite a bit. But for whatever he lacked, maybe as a basketball coach, he exceeded that as a mentor, and would bring in, Mr. Bacote would come and help us out with this, that, and the other. He'd bring Charlie Brown, and he was one of those people that knew it. He knew what he knew, and knew when he needed to bring somebody else in to take that knowledge base to the next level. And to me, that's what a coach is. It's not fake it till you make it. It's what are the resources we need to pull in. So for him, that was the first piece of the basketball thing, was just having Coach Conrad to kind of give you the keys to the car. But again, you talked to Ray Washington, and this is the legacy of Reeves Conrad. Ray Washington, Dr. Ray Washington, very prominent general surgeon in North Carolina. He was a basketball player of the year with the St. Joe's. Very good friends with my brother, and that's who I played basketball with growing up, because they could beat the hell out of me. And when I was growing up, they would say, you can play the point, but you're not allowed to shoot, young man. You can pass, you play defense, but you can't shoot. That's when I learned how to distribute. But Milan Brown, who was player of the year, went to play at Howard. Then
Milan, stop right there. Hold on. With Milan, we know about Marseille and Morocco because they came in and built on his legacy, but he was a phenomenal player and a great coach. Still a great coach.
So he's an assistant at Pitt right now. I think this is his first or second year there, but a phenomenal coach. Was the head coach of Holy Cross, and he's been a couple places. A very accomplished coach. But again, if you have guys that you're looking up to and who are willing to take the time to develop and mentor you and give you harsh, hard feedback and praise when warranted. So if you look at Ray Washington, Milan Brown, Tony Jordan, Marseille Brown, those 4 point guards, there was no breaking continuity. So you're looking at about 12 years of player of the year in basketball and point guard leadership. And I think that may have been the golden era in terms of basketball point play at that high school at that particular time.
Well, what you guys did, you talk about the point guard, you guys did a phenomenal job of controlling tempo, because when I watched you play, and there's a particular game I remember, I believe it was in the district tournament. It wasn't the Christmas tournament, where you were playing once again Hampton High, and it was a tied ball game. And Hampton and you guys went back and forth. I believe Hampton, I don't think Jermaine Golson was still there. He might have been.
No, he had graduated. Jermaine played here.
Yeah, Jermaine was gone. But I remember Hampton had a real good team. I was on JV.
Yeah.
But we were in the Fort Eustis tournament, which was at that time for the 757, especially on the Peninsula. That was our Madison Square. That was the mecca for the district tournament and Christmas tournament. And you held the ball. You came down. You guys can't see me because I'm sitting down at my desk. And you held it. And Virginia still, which frustrates me more now than back then, does not have a shot clock,
they need a shot clock.
That is ridiculous. But you know what? It worked to your favor. It was smart by you and Coach Conrad. And you held the ball. And you sitting there with those green shorts.
Them short green shorts.
Them short green shorts. And you held it, and I'm sitting under the basket, and it's packed. And you know how hot that gym got.
Oh yeah.
And you held the ball, and then you finally went. You looked at Coach, and you did the nod. You went, and then you hit the game winner. And then right as the buzzer sounded, and I was just like, man, that point guard play. You could tell Coach Conrad instilled in you guys the importance of controlling tempo, and when to get the ball down low, when to take the shot, and not to be reckless with the basketball. I think it was, of course, you guys had some talent. You were deep, you were athletic, but you also were disciplined. And I think that's what I enjoyed, even as a peer and the guy a few years behind you guys.
There's been some really good basketball teams come through there, but I don't know if there's been some basketball teams that have won the state. But I don't know from a standpoint overall talent, we probably should have won, and we didn't, and it is what it is. But that was probably the most talented basketball team that probably came from that area at that time. When you're talking, I'm 6'2", and I'm the shortest starter, and you got 6'9", 6'8", Macy Brooks at 6'5", and Chris Taylor at 6'3", and Morocco came off the bench. Great guys to play with. And you talk about the discipline piece of it. One thing Coach Conrad used to always do is challenge us. We knew we could beat you in a full court running gun game or a half court game because we were just so much bigger than everybody. But it would be games, no matter who we were playing, a timeout would be called, and say the score was 38-13. he would go, can you guys, it's the fourth quarter, can you hold these guys to under 17 points? And he would go, can you keep them to 3 baskets this quarter? He challenged us throughout the course of games, and if we were games we won, but because we gave up, 10 points in a quarter or 12 points in a quarter, we had to run the next day, because we didn't meet the challenge. Mm-hmm. And he made it so much. It wasn't about us beating the other team. It was about us improving upon where we started and getting better. And I think he constantly did that during timeouts. Says, the game's over. It's the second quarter, third quarter. Here's how we're going to challenge ourselves. And I think that, again, that's the mark of a coach understanding his team and getting the most out of his players.
Yeah, you go back to a second because you talk about Chris Taylor and Macy Brooks, Macy Brooks, another multi-sport standout athlete who eventually ended up going to the Dallas Cowboys. Yeah. But in JMU, you played with him. Yeah. But you guys were huge. I mean, Abraham, just what was it like being the point guard with all that talent and just athletes and big athletes in high school?
They corrected a lot of my mistakes, I can tell you.
Really?
I mean, just, as a point guard, Coach Conrad just kind of let me call offensively what we wanted to run. He just said, here, you know what we need to do and run and call the defenses. But when you have that kind of talent, there was never a night I went out and said, with Tony Rutland and Iverson, those guys had to score 20 plus a night to have a chance. Nothing, no knock against them or their team. Those guys had to score. For us, I mean, it was one of those things where, hey, if they want to rotate or double team this person, then that person will step up, or Macy will pop up with a 15-point game out of nowhere. Just having that luxury of being able to not having to go into a game going, well, if I don't score 28 today, we're going to lose. Just not having that carry that pressure for any of us was a unique luxury to have. So it allows you to play loose and free and just enjoy the game. Now, we used to go into every game, and Morocco would always, he says it to this day, there's not one game we played I thought there was a chance we would ever lose. And I said, it's always good to have that confidence, but it was about the same time being able to play freely, trusting your teammates, knowing that they were going to do their job. That whole season was just a joy, just to be with those guys and have that experience.
What how far did y'all go? Because you mentioned not being able to win state.
We lost to, I believe, we went 26-2 that year and lost to Highland Springs both times. One in the Christmas tournament, and they had Jafonde Williams, Ed Perry, who played for the Chiefs, who ended up going to JMU as well, play football. And they had another guy named Melvin Grant or Melvin Gray. So they had 3 really good players as well, and we lost to them in the and I think they went further than losing to Patrick Henry out of Roanoke.
Yeah, they lost to Troy. They lost to my guy Troy Mans. Yeah, Troy Mans.
Yeah, Troy Mans played at George Mason, I believe. He continued his career there, I believe.
He went to George Mason, then transferred to Virginia Tech. That's how we became friends, and that's how I ended up knowing him.
I don't know him. I've played against him and some AAU stuff. Very good basketball player. Never spent any time with him, but very good basketball player in his own right.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
You talk about Tony Rutland and Iverson. There was a game I came to. I don't know if we didn't play that night or I believe it was my 10th grade year. I don't know, but me and like 8 of my boys, we went. It was at Bethel, or maybe it was at Kecoughtan. But I can't remember where the game was at. But it was between you and Iverson and Rutland, and it was packed. And Faisal posted it on Facebook, Faisal Abraham, and I went and rewatched it. And I remember being there that night, and I showed my son and my family just the talent on the court. That was a nostalgic moment for me, and I was just, in the district just like you guys. I was part of it. Is that a game you remember, or is there a particular basketball game, you remember? Like, was it states? Was it going against some of the guys you played against in the playoffs, or was it against Ferguson? Remember, Ferguson had Aaron Brooks, Antoine Darden, Alonzo Smith, Antoine Smith, Alonzo Darden. They were big. Aaron Brooks was 6'4". And Smith went on to be the CIAA Player of the Year twice. What team was it, or what games that resonated?
The big game. Anytime you're playing Tony Rutland and AI, I mean, it's going to be interesting, and it's going to be a game of some highlights and some lowlights. But I try to always. I will say this: I have never lost a game to I will say that. I've never lost a game to them. But no, just knowing those two guys and how they play, and they would elevate the level of play of those around them and who they're playing against. I think we ended up playing Joe Smith played at Maury, and Joe Smith was out of what high school did Joe Smith go to?
Maury.
Maury. Yeah, we played there. Played them my senior year. Come back the next 2 nights later and got to play Booker T. Washington with Michael Evans, who I thought may have been the best basketball player overall down there. Those games stand out to me because you look at that gym that we played those games in, and it was the Turstland gym, and it's packed 4,000 or 5,000 people in there.
It was more than that. It was packed because if you got to go to the bathroom or get some popcorn, your seat was taken, and you on the south side, and it was intense.
It was intense. And so, I mean, that playoff run, I mean, there was, the games, I think, against Warwick, it was our homecoming my senior year. Warwick must have played 4 quarters to slow it down. I think at the end of the first quarter, the score was 4-2. But, we ended up blowing it open. But just that day of finally, I think Phi got his basketball for 1,000 points, and Rashawn had gotten his for 1,000 points, and I got my ball for, breaking the school's all-time assist record. That was just a moment for me that, because of who Phi was and who Rashawn was, and, it's a memory I have of me giving my ball to my dad, who, for many years drove me to practice, worked long days, dropping off, bringing back, and running me around. That was a memory just more or less about, happy to see my teammates hitting that milestone and breaking a record for myself, and just being able to give that ball to my dad, in that moment. It's something that really stands out of my mind. Like, it's a top memory of mine from basketball.
And that's what it's all about, man. And God bless him, because you mentioned dads, especially back then, they worked a lot and they had to get us everywhere. Parents still do it now, but I mean, it was crazy, because you playing, it ain't just one season. You playing, they overlap, the seasons overlap, and the demands were crucial. You ended up going to JMU, but take me back to what happened. How'd you end up at JMU? Were you offered in both sports? Was it, a school you thought you were going to somewhere else, or what happened?
Basketball blossoming happened my senior year. So, my offers, I had basketball offers, but they weren't as plentiful as football. JMU I was being recruited for basketball, but it was more or less for football. But the big pitch they made there was if you come to JMU, and I didn't know I didn't know who it was, where it was, or how to get there. When I made my official visit there, my mom and my dad, when of course my brother came along, just tag along. And again, the power of mom. We make our trips. We went to NC State, Duke, William and Mary, JMU, football, we got trips. And my mom just said, you know what? I just really like the JMU. I just really feel like that's the place you need to be. And I was like, personally, I wanted to go to Duke and play football. So that's where I was, in my mind, I was thinking. But, she continued, and, again, mom knows me better than I know myself at that time. You listen to mom and say, hey, this was the opportunity. So I ended up playing. I was on a basketball team for 2 years, but I had shoulder surgery. So I only played 1 year. Didn't play a lot, but I played. And then I played football my 5 years there. So I think the calling card for me there was the opportunity to play 2 sports. Eric Williams, who was the quarterback before Kermit Buggs at Kecoughtan, was the quarterback at JMU. So there was some familiarity there where, they know, we know what kind of athlete Eric is, and we know what kind of athlete we want you to come here and run this offense as well for Rip Shear, who's another powerful mentor of mine, friend, coach. He's still doing his thing in his 40-some-odd year coaching at the San Diego Chargers now. But that's what kind of brought me to JMU, the ability to play 2 sports. I'm not a mama's boy, but I was like 3.5 hours. It was far enough that I can get home. And, when mom says, hey, I think this is the place for you, again, yes, ma'am, I'll do it. And that's probably one of the better choices I've ever made, or at least a choice somebody made for me that's ever happened, put it that way.
I remember when you were at JMU, obviously, like I said, I followed your career. Anytime somebody's from home, and, back then I was a few years behind you, I started getting recruited after you left. And I remember JMU was really recruiting me hard, and I had, big offers, but at the same time, they were on my list. And part of that was because you, John Stein, my teammate at Hampton High, a great receiver, and then Macy Brooks was there. There was a lot of local flavor there, and you guys were having success. And it was again, back then I think there was more of a pride, or a lot of guys wanted to stay in state. Now, because Virginia is a state very well known because of our era, and even before us, that you have the Ohio States, the Alabamas, and Clemsons that come down there now. They did back in the day, but they really come down there now. But, I was really considering JMU because of what you guys were doing there and all the local talent they had. Yeah. And the campus is nice. And it had a Virginia Tech feel with the school I went to.
Yeah. Virginia Tech is a beautiful campus. Virginia Tech recruited me, but I didn't make an official visit out there. For me, it was like I was too far away from home. And for me, it was still, they didn't quite define, that when they said, all I ever played was quarterback. I don't know anything else. But they were like, we want you to be an athlete, and I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's offense or defense. JMU was very defined. We want you to be a quarterback. Duke was defined. We want you to be a quarterback. Richmond was very defined. William and Mary. So I like Tech. The 5-hour piece of it, I could have got over, but I just did not know what they wanted from me there.
Well, they had a history of doing that. They did that the entire Beamer era, the whole you're an athlete, because I'm speaking of my 5 years there in recruitment. They would just recruit athletes, and then when they got there, they would plug them where they thought they see.
They figure it out. Yeah.
Cam Chancellor was an athlete. The only guys they knew that were going to play quarterback, obviously, were the Tyrod Taylors, the Michael Vicks, the Maurice DeShazos, those guys. But other guys they would put at rover, linebacker, safety, receiver. But that, and I tell people, and I'm sure you know this, that was actually a compliment because you were an athlete, but I understand exactly, because I hear a lot of guys that play quarterback, especially back then. Now you have the quarterback position for dual threat quarterbacks is much more respected. They actually tailor the offense for them. But back then you had to fight harder to keep that position.
It's something else I can admit now. I mean, looking back on it, not having any shame about it, I wasn't, I didn't take football entirely seriously in high school. I just played it because I happened to be so much decent at it, and they didn't have anybody else around to do it. And my mama told me to. But I didn't know how good I was or wasn't, and I wasn't sure if I go to Virginia Tech, can I even compete to get on the field? So there was a little bit of that lack of confidence, even though I think we played at a high level down there. I just wasn't sure how that translated to a more regional or national scale. So for me, it was, well, JMU, I know I'm their number one recruit. They want me to play quarterback. All these things are known. I'm going to get a chance to play basketball. It just kept me in a comfort zone. Actually, I didn't turn 18 because I could have I graduated from Kecoughtan at 17. I didn't turn 18 until 2 days before I got there. Well, about 3 days before I got to JMU. Mm-hmm. So I still hadn't finished growing, still wasn't sure about a lot of things, but that's something I don't think I really ever shared that with anybody. And one of the reasons was a little bit of apprehension of, can I compete at Virginia Tech? Could I win a spot at Virginia? That kind of helped fuel that JMU decision as a 1AA program versus a 1A program. Again, I don't think it was a wrong choice for me.
So let's talk about your time at JMU. How was it? I mean, obviously I mentioned John Stein and Macy, but for you get there, you were a quarterback. But what ended up happening, and how was your time there? And not just on the football field, but talk about JMU. I mean, it's a school that now we're known. They won a national championship, and it's a great university. But at the time when you were there, similar to Kecoughtan, you were kind of bringing it up. You guys were building the legacy that JMU has.
Yeah, I mean, from where we started at JMU to what it is today, I mean, one thing I've loved about it was the college feel. It was a feel of community there that was very strong, and it still permeates the campus and the city today. You get all these folks from all over Virginia, North Carolina, but you had the New Yorks and the DCs and the Baltimore. So they're bringing some of that more cosmopolitan type of swagger, if you will, down to this little hamlet called Harrisonburg. Mm-hmm. So, because the school is, now it's 20,000, then it was maybe 12 or 13. It wasn't this overwhelming size of like an Ohio State with 47,000 students, nor was it, a college with 4,500. So it was just big enough where you felt part of the community, not ostracized by it. There was always somebody you could find that there was a commonality of interest. And, and the campus was beautiful. It just had all those intangibles that you think about when you want yourself to go to college, or your kids, you start thinking about, the atmosphere. That's what it was. And, I'll talk about the football in a minute, but just that whole being in Harrisonburg on any day of the week, it was beautiful. I still go back when I can. I'm a little ways away from it now. But yeah, it's a very powerful feeling that overcomes me when we talk about being somewhere where you fit socially, academically, spiritually, athletically.
Yeah. And the football field. I mean, like I said, now they won a national championship. They get their fair share of in-state and out-of-state talent. They beat my alma mater a few years ago, and that team went on to win the ACC. They won 11 games that year and went to the Orange Bowl, and JMU beat them. And I still hear about it. One reason why I get annoyed, they make it known, all the alumni, so many of my friends. It's funny, when JMU beat us that year in 2010, I never realized I had so many friends that went to JMU until that day. Yeah, but all jokes aside, man, talk about, your playing career there. What eventually happened? What are some bright spots, some memories, and some things you learned as a player there?
Football became more of a real thing for me when I got there, because it wasn't just, the weight room, the academic career, the playbook goes from being, 12 and 13 dive to, Rip Shear is, anybody knows Rip Shear. Rip Shear is a football coach who's part philosopher, part Mensa. So it's, the playbook's this thick. And just having to kind of go, wait a minute, I really got to focus in on this. You can't just get by with just running around and being better than everybody or being, whatever. So it's really having to focus in and prioritize what you want to do and what you're here for. So Eric Williams was a senior. And as a matter of fact, in my first college game, Eric Williams was a senior, and there's a guy named John Gaylor who was a backup. I was a third-string quarterback, true freshman. So, and because of the offense we ran some option, it was, college offense back in the day. They said John Gaylor was a pocket passer. And Coach Shear said to me, if Eric Williams gets hurt and he goes down for a game, we're not going to bother playing because we're redshirting you. If Eric Williams goes down for 3 to 4 or 5 games, you're playing, because I'm not changing my offense for John Gaylor. Like, oh, crap. We were playing Virginia Tech, and their score was actually at halftime. I think it was like 21-20. Eric Williams, who 8'5'7", 180 pounds, soaking wet, with cement shoes on, he took a shot, and he's one of the toughest SOBs I'm ever going to meet. He took a shot, and I think, he's on the ground laying there, and I think I may have beat the training team too. Going, Eric, you okay? Get up, because I ain't ready. I ain't ready for this. I'm not ready for this. But now Eric got up, finished the game. But that next spring, going into, and the season ended. I played basketball. At the time, Lefty Drizel was the basketball coach. So the legendary Lefty Drizel was the basketball coach at JMU. So playing for him, and JMU had a really good basketball team and program at the time. Didn't have a lot of time for socialism, or didn't have a lot of friends. It was football, study hall, basketball, watch and repeat.
Yep.
So going into that spring, I played spring ball and suffered a non-contact throwing injury to my right shoulder. It was bad. It came out. The subluxation came out. I never had a shoulder problem before. Got it back set. 3 weeks later, it came out again, to the point they're like, you need to have surgery. So, thinking maybe I can come back possibly and play quarterback by the fall. I think I was in a sling for about 10 to 12 weeks. And the irony of all this, what was going on in Syracuse, we had no idea. Donovan McNabb was fighting for the starting quarterback job with a guy named Mike Cauley. Mike Cauley lost the job.
Mike who?
Mike Cauley. Okay. Mike Cauley. Mike Cauley lost the job, and he transferred to JMU because I was on the shelf, and they needed a quarterback. Mike Cauley transfers to JMU, becomes JMU's quarterback, and was JMU's all-time passer for a number of years. He went in the 4th round after he graduated. He went to the Colts and played for the Colts for maybe a season or two, and played in Canada for a couple of years.
Wow!
And I ended up going over to defense. So I went from about 190 pounds to getting the Raven family, getting serious about football, to about 240 and playing weak side linebacker. And absolutely loved it. And team captain my senior year, and had I would call, by all means and purposes, a very solid career at JMU.
That game that y'all were down 21-20 to Tech, what was the final score? What ended up happening?
I think it was 48-26 or 48-27.
Okay, I was just
The reason the game stands out because late in the game, they ran a halfback option pass to Antonio Freeman. And Antonio Freeman got down to the 1 yard line and kind of laid in the end zone. I mean, it was like 5 minutes to go in the game. Coach Shear was pissed. And you know the kind of man the coach of Virginia Tech is. You know what kind of guy. He was a stand-up guy. He made Antonio Freeman write a letter to Rip Shear apologizing for his antics in that game.
Beamer? Coach Beamer?
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that was before I got there.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. But honestly, that's Beams. That's you know, that's Beamer.
Yeah.
He's gonna make you do that. He is not for the shenanigans. He does not like showing out like that. And Freeman has always had that passion and charisma. That's just him. I mean, Antonio Freeman was from Baltimore. When I got to Tech, he made it be known. He was a trash talker, and he was overconfident, but he could match his play.
And another interesting memory from that, you know, we're talking about Eric's injury. Eric's on the field, trainer staff was over dealing with Eric, and it looked bad. I mean, we didn't know what was going to happen. So I said, well, let me go ahead and get loose and get warmed up. Mm-hmm. I'm starting to throw, and something hits me in the back. Someone threw a beer bottle, hit me right in the back of my shoulder pads. And I was like, yeah, this is a hostile environment right here. And at 18 years old, I was like, oh God, am I ready for this? But it was, I mean, that was my first college game. Just the energy in Lane Stadium that day. Even though, and I think it's just being the first game, not just because it's an interstate rival, but just being the first game, the place was packed. It was a good game, and you know, again, it was like that was my welcome into college football.
Yeah. So, you know, Tony, you know, you talk about JMU and Kecoughtan, and you play for great coaches. Now you're a coach, and now you're a father. You go from, you know, a young man finding your way playing and being mentored by Milan Brown and Coach Conrad and Coach Newsome, which were blessings all the way. And I'm sure you still carry those life lessons you learned from them into your career, personally and professionally. Talk about where you're at now, what's been going on since you left JMU, and you know what are you doing now, and talk about the impact you have as a coach and as a father.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. So, and that's probably the most important legacy I'm ever going to leave are those things that are being a coach, mentor, and father. So I have two sons. I have Elijah Alexander, who is 17, and Ethan Xavier Jordan, who's 13. They were my two boys. They both play football, basketball guys. And, you know, my oldest one is going into his senior year, and my youngest one's going into 8th grade. So my oldest one is very big into football, just got his first couple of offers here last month. He transferred from, I don't know if you are familiar with St. Xavier High School. It's probably one of the preeminent, you know, private programs in the country. He was there for 2 years, and he was a late bloomer like me. I mean, the kid's now 6'1", 189 pounds. But when he started there, he was like me, 5'6", 130 pounds, and kind of got overlooked. Now he's back into his home district. It's being schools, you know, 3,800 students there. It's a huge school. And he's a start next receiver now. And a lot of it's just been coaching. When we moved here about 12 years ago out in Cincinnati. I say all this because he wanted to play football, and he wanted to play tackle football. And my wife is like my mom. You can go out there and play. She's that kind of person.
Okay. So you kept that theme going.
She keeps it 100. She keeps it more 100 with them than I do. So anyway, we signed him up and went out there and played. You know, I just took my lawn chair because I had just finished coaching at the University of Memphis for 3 years with Rip Shear. So I took my little lawn chair, sat out there, and the coach was going through some drills and whatnot. And you know, he's telling the kids some stuff that just kind of ain't right. And I was like, hey, in a break, I said, hey, introduce myself. Hey, you might want to set this drill up like this, like this. And so, you know, it was like, and I went back and sat in my lawn chair. And he calls me that night and says, you want to help me coach? And so that started that 8-year journey of, you know, working a lot with the youth program, becoming the president. Now I run one of the youth football leagues here in greater Cincinnati area, just making sure from an organization standpoint, we have 10 organizations that are there. So it's not just being coaching my kid, but it's also being a mentor to young coaches, being a mentor to kids who single family and dual parent homes, and just being involved in the community and giving back. So, you know, because of what Phil McCoy, who's my baseball coach, Mike Niamaka, who was my Little League baseball coach in basketball, you know, you talk about Curt Newsome, you talk about Revis Conrad, this is just my time for all the stuff that they did for and pouring energy into me is me being a vessel to pour that energy back out into something else. So, been able to get here, and I've been here for 12 years longer than I thought I would be, but being involved in the youth sports programs, being on the board for Cancer-Free Kids for a number of years, helping raise awareness, working money for pediatric cancer research, and doing some work I've done in the past here with the Big Brothers Big Sisters and the YMCA. I think all those things come from my experience in 757, and all those things that I believe wholeheartedly make a community better. And hopefully it's helped some other kid, get to their next, station in life, whether it's high school, college, or somewhere, that they go back and they plant those seeds in their community, and it keeps perpetuating itself. So I just think it's, for me, it's not something I do. I just feel compelled that I have to do it. I love to do it, but it's something I have to do because so many people did so much for me. It's my obligation.
Yeah. And I appreciate, and I'm sure I speak for many, I appreciate what you're doing as a coach and as a father and as a leader in the community. This has been a great honor for me to have you on the show. And this is the part of the show where we wrap up and I allow my guests to kind of build on what you just said. I want you to, Tony, share with the people that watch this interview and even people that will watch it later on the YouTube channel, some words of encouragement, inspiration, whatever you want to call it. I want you to share what life has taught you in the games of football and basketball and sports you played, but also the importance of giving back and being a leader and sacrificing to improve your community. Just what would you tell them? What do you want to share with them?
For me, I will say this, and everybody's gonna have their own 2 cents, but try to go somewhere, wherever you are, you can make an impact in your community by doing something, whether it's a one-to-one mentorship, whether it's coaching a team, whether it's volunteerism. Try to find a way to uplift your community. There are so many people who just, not all of my little kids too. There are adults here that I mentor who just need a little guidance. And I think a lot of us have a lot of experience, trial and error, whatever you want to call it, that can help somebody along that path. So, community. If you got to do it because you want to coach a team, fine. If just get involved in your community. The other thing that I'm learning as I get older here, I'm 46 years old. I feel like, not that I have a wealth of knowledge, but we got to get back to having conversations with each other about perspective. I think we've lost the ability to see your point of view, and then I can share my point of view without having it, you know what you're talking about. So, get involved, get engaged with people. I'm a big fan of social media, but at the same time, I feel like social media has also isolated ourselves into these little pockets of just hang out with people that believe what we want to believe in or do what we do. Again, I'm a big proponent of we got to get back out and be able to have conversations, interact, and we're all part of the human race. We're all part of our community. We're all part of the United States of America. We all have our part to do to make this a better place for not just ourselves, but future generations. And so I guess I want to challenge everybody to how can you do a little bit to make things better in your, in your social structures and in your environment, your communities.
Absolutely. Very well said. And I agree. I think sometimes it's okay to disagree, but let's build together and find a solution. And you've been a great solution in your career, and you continue to be an inspiration to a lot of people that follow you. Well-spoken, you carry yourself well. I appreciate you jumping on today, Tony. And I appreciate, like I said a second ago, what you're doing to impact your community as a coach and as a father and a leader. Thank you again, Tony, for jumping on. This has been a great interview. Reminiscing about the 7-5 and also all the great times and games being played. This has been really, really fun for me. And like I say every week to my listeners and viewers and to everybody that supports Vicktory Life, no matter where you go, no matter what you do, make sure you leave a positive impact and a great legacy. Thank you, Tony, and thank you guys for supporting Vicktory Life.
My pleasure.